Imagine buying a premium wool suit in New York. Then, that same evening, ordering a rack of Australian lamb at one of the city's finest restaurants. At first, those two products seem completely unrelated. One belongs to the world of fashion, the other belongs on a dinner plate. But behind both products is an animal that has helped shape Australia's economy for generations: the sheep. Australia's sheep industry isn't simply about raising animals for meat. It is a complex global business involving wool, lamb, mutton, processing, transport, technology, and international trade. And in 2026, the combined value of Australia's sheep meat, wool, and live sheep industries remains worth billions of dollars. So how did one of the world's driest continents build such a powerful sheep industry? The answer begins long before a lamb ever reaches a supermarket. When people hear the words Australian sheep farming, they often imagine enormous flocks spread across endless grassland, and the scale really is extraordinary. But the number of sheep isn't the most interesting part of the story. The real story is what one sheep can produce. To many consumers, a sheep means one thing: meat. But to an Australian producer, that same animal can represent several different streams of value. A sheep can produce wool. That wool can eventually become a premium suit in New York, outdoor clothing in Colorado, or luxury fashion in Europe. Later, the animal can enter the sheep meat supply chain, producing lamb or mutton for domestic and international markets. And the value doesn't necessarily stop there. Processing can create additional products and byproducts used in other industries. In other words, Australia isn't simply exporting sheep, it is exporting value. And that is one reason the industry has remained so important despite droughts, changing markets, rising costs, and changing consumer expectations. But every successful sheep business begins with something incredibly vulnerable: a newborn lamb. Because before there can be wool, before there can be meat, there first has to be survival. Every billion-dollar agricultural industry has a fragile beginning. For Australia's sheep industry, that beginning can be a newborn lamb weighing only a few kilograms. Farmers carefully plan breeding and lambing seasons around pasture availability, weather, and the nutritional needs of the ewe. The goal is simple: give the lamb the best possible start, because those first hours can matter enormously. A newborn lamb needs to find its mother and receive colostrum, the first milk that provides critical nutrients and immune protection. And the environment can make that challenge even harder. Cold rain, sudden temperature drops, drought, poor pasture conditions, all can increase pressure on both ewe and lamb. Nature doesn't follow a business plan, and Australian sheep producers understand that better than almost anyone. For American and British viewers, this is an important reminder. Modern agriculture may use GPS, drones, electronic identification, and sophisticated genetics, but livestock production still depends on biology. No computer can replace a mother feeding her lamb, and no machine can completely control the weather. That combination of technology and nature is what makes sheep farming such a unique business. As lambs grow stronger, they enter another stage of the production system, and this is where sheep farming can become controversial. One of the most debated practices is tail docking. For people unfamiliar with sheep production, the obvious question is, why remove part of a lamb's tail? The answer given by many producers is animal health. Sheep can be vulnerable to fly strike, particularly when flies are attracted to moist, contaminated wool around the rear of the animal. If severe fly strike is left untreated, it can cause serious suffering and potentially kill the sheep. Supporters of tail docking argue that reducing this risk can protect animal welfare. Critics argue that the procedure itself causes pain and that the industry should pursue better alternatives. And that debate continues. The same conversation surrounds other management practices, including vaccination, parasite control, and handling. For sheep grazing across enormous Australian landscapes, preventing disease isn't optional, but neither is animal welfare. That creates a difficult question for modern agriculture. How do you protect millions of animals while continuously improving the way they are managed? There isn't a simple answer, and that is exactly why animal welfare remains one of the most important conversations surrounding livestock farming. When people picture an Australian sheep farm, they might imagine one farmer standing on a hill watching a flock. The reality is very different. Managing sheep across Australia's enormous landscapes requires an entire support system, and some of the most important workers aren't even human. Australian Kelpies and Border Collies have become legendary working dogs because they can move and control large groups of sheep with remarkable efficiency. But today's sheep farmer has another powerful tool: technology. Drones can survey remote grazing country. GPS can help producers monitor animals and property. Electronic identification systems can provide individual animal records, and data can help farmers make decisions about breeding, health, movement, and performance. Think about that. A sheep may look like just another animal in a huge flock, but increasingly, it can also have a digital identity, and that matters because modern food consumers want more than a product. They want confidence. Confidence that the animal was properly managed. Confidence that food safety standards were followed. And confidence that the product can be traced through the supply chain. Traceability has become a valuable part of modern agriculture, and it becomes even more important when Australian sheep products begin traveling thousands of miles across the world. Most haircuts cost money. This one can make money. Every year, Australian sheep are shorn, producing one of the country's most famous agricultural products: wool. And among Australia's most important wool-producing sheep are merinos. Merino wool is prized for its softness, fineness, breathability, and versatility. That is why Australian wool can end up in everything from premium business clothing to outdoor apparel and luxury fashion. But there's something especially interesting about the economics. For a wool-producing sheep, the fleece can generate value repeatedly during its productive life. That means the animal isn't necessarily creating value through meat alone. It can contribute to farm income through wool and eventually through sheep meat. This diversified value proposition has helped make wool-producing sheep such an important part of Australian agriculture. But wool isn't immune to market cycles. Prices fall, demand changes, consumer preferences evolve, and farmers have to manage all of those risks. That is the reality of agricultural investment. There is rarely one guaranteed source of income. Successful producers are constantly balancing productivity, costs, weather, animal health, and market conditions. And eventually, for animals entering the meat system, another global supply chain begins. For many consumers, this is the part of the story they rarely see. Long before Australian lamb reaches an American restaurant or supermarket, it moves through a highly regulated supply chain. Animals are handled, transported, and processed under systems designed around food safety, animal welfare, and product quality. At the processing facility, different parts of the carcass can serve different markets. Premium cuts can go to restaurants. Legs and other cuts can enter retail channels. Other products can be processed for food manufacturing and additional markets. The objective isn't simply speed, it is consistency. Because global customers expect Australian lamb to arrive safely, and they expect the product to meet strict specifications. After processing and packaging, products can move into refrigerated storage before beginning another international journey. Australia exports sheep meat to markets around the world, with official government statistics tracking shipments across more than 57 destination markets. And that brings us to an interesting question. If countries like the United States already produce sheep meat, why import Australian lamb? Because international food markets aren't simply about who can produce the most. They're about timing, supply, consumer demand, product specifications, and market access. Modern food production is global, and Australian sheep are part of that global system. At first, this seemed like a story about sheep. Then it became a story about farming, then technology, then logistics, then international trade. But perhaps it's really a story about something much bigger: connection. A newborn lamb in rural Australia can eventually become wool in someone's winter clothing, lamb on a family's dinner table, or one small part of a supply chain, stretching thousands of miles across oceans. And behind that supply chain are people most consumers never see: farmers, veterinarians, shearers, truck drivers, processors, inspectors, researchers, port workers, exporters. Each person contributes one small piece to a system capable of supplying customers around the world. And Australia's sheep industry is changing. The country is investing in technology, productivity, and new market opportunities. At the same time, the industry faces difficult questions about climate, profitability, animal welfare, and the future of live animal exports. Australia's live sheep exports by sea are scheduled to end on May 1, 2028, creating another major transition for producers and regional communities. So the future of Australian sheep farming isn't simply about producing more sheep. It is about producing value more efficiently, meeting changing consumer expectations, and finding ways to remain profitable in an increasingly competitive global food system. So after following the journey, what surprised you the most? The technology, the global logistics, the scale of Australia's sheep industry, or the incredible amount of value that can come from a single animal? Because the Australian sheep industry isn't simply a story about what happens on a farm. It's a story about how agriculture connects one side of the world to the other. From an Australian paddock, to a wool mill in Europe, to a restaurant in New York, to a supermarket thousands of miles away. And perhaps that's the most fascinating thing about sheep farming. The animal may begin its journey in one remote corner of Australia, but its economic story can travel around the entire world. What do you think? Is this the future of farming? Or has modern livestock agriculture become too industrial? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more documentaries exploring the world's most fascinating livestock industries, subscribe to Bokit Films, because the next time you see a sheep, you might see more than just an animal. You might see an entire global industry.